Hey/X/ let me tell you a story. Pic is a map of the place I was staying, just to give you a better feel for what's going on. The green is all forest and the yellow is grassy areas. The house was on a hill and the brown stuff is a path. This is my cousin's property where I visited recently. Crap went down. Never going back. B23. Go visit cousin in the country for 3 days. He has a house with a small lake, or large pond, or whatever, big enough to swim in. His property also has a decent amount of thick forest. Forest surrounds the lake, his house, and this largish field area. Field has a shed filled with junk. It's a pretty cool place. I used to go as a young kid. Basically spent every summer there of my life up until I was 12. Suddenly stopped going, and whenever I told my mom I wanted to go back, she just said no. Gave no reason, just no. Eventually give up and move on. But a few weeks ago I got a call from my cousin. Hey, I haven't seen you in forever, come visit sometime. Why not? My cousin tells me I can bring a friend or two if I want, but he says he's inviting some friends over too. His parents are on a cruise in the Caribbean apparently, and he's house sitting. He's older than me, 25 or 26 I think. So go visit with buddies of mine, Mark and Aiden. Meet cousin, Luke, and his 5 friends, Chris, Mary, Henry, Jesse, Girl, and Jasper. 8 of us in total. Me and my buddies arrive around 1 and unpack our stuff. Greeted with weed and beer. Cool, all my cousin's friends seem like chill people. Eventually settle in. Head out to the lake to swim until it's about 3 or 4. While I'm swimming I have this bad feeling, as if I'm being watched. Wave it off, enjoy girls in bikinis and the booze. Cousin has a water trampoline for the lake. Also a paddle boat. Dick around all afternoon until about 6. Cousin tells us it's time to wrap it up. PSH, party pooper we all say. Cousin just waves it off, and even though we argue he makes us head up to the house. We eat some pasta for dinner and it's like 7 now. Beautiful summer night, I want to watch the sunset. Grab a 6-pack and head outside. Where you going Anon? My cousin asks. Oh, just outside, it's a nice night I say. Cousin looks nervous. I don't know about that Anon, there's bears outside, they get pretty close to the house. Well, if that happens I'll just come inside I tell him. Still looks worried. Lets me go. Chill outside for a little bit. Cousin comes outside after a while. Brings gun with him. Lil Wood. WTF you need this for? I ask. Me being raised in the suburbs I've never touched a gun before, let alone seen a real one. You know, just in case. Sit outside for a while, the sun is gone and it starts to get dark. Cousin insists we go inside. I give in. He locks the door behind us, but I notice there's a huge fucking deadbolt on the door. Like really big, unreasonably big. 3 other smaller locks on the door, American Samoa well. Whatever, I guess they're just secure. Head upstairs and chill with everyone else. They're watching a movie and smoking some weed. Take a seat next to Mary, because she's hot, and I'm trying to get my dick wet. We chat it up, she's cool, and drunk, and high. Easy pickings boys. She suggests we go somewhere quieter. Head over to a bedroom on the 1st floor. Start making out, get some at foy action, she's topless. She suddenly stops. What's wrong? I ask her. She says nothing and just stares behind me kinda like she's looking for something. Suddenly she screams. Loudest fucking scream I've ever heard. Runs out of the fucking room topless. I look behind me, nothing there. WTF, am I that repulsive? Grab her shirt and bra and follow her out. She's sitting in the middle of the living room in the fetal position. I give her the shirt and shit, she's putting it back on as everyone else runs downstairs. What's wrong, I ask. What's wrong, WTF was that screaming, everyone else asks. She doesn't talk for a few minutes. People start saying I R-word her. I'm like, nope, STFU. She finally speaks up. Thanks bitch, now tell them I didn't R-word you. What she says clears my name, but also fucking ruins my vacation. While we were hooking up, I told you it was consensual. I looked out the window and thought I saw something, but because the light was on I couldn't really see out the window all that well, she says. Makes sense. Asterisk, all of a sudden someone's face gets real close to the window, except their face was all wrong. What? Their eyes were all sunken in and their nose seemed really broken. Everyone is quiet as fuck listening to her. Asterisk, and their mouth and just hanging open, almost crooked, like they had a dislocated jaw or something. Everyone starts freaking out. OMG, there's creepers watching us, WTF. Ew, gross, he sounded ugly. Some people think she's kidding. It was probably just a nonce reflection, Aiden says. LOL, herder. I'm being effing serious right now, you bastards. Mary snaps at him. I know what I effing saw. All this time my cousin is just quiet. Hasn't said a word yet. I ask him what he thinks. Everyone shuts up to listen to him. I think we shouldn't worry about it, he says. The bastard was wrong and he knew it. Mary gets mad at people for not taking her seriously, but eventually calms down. We all settle down and sleep upstairs in the big room with the TV. The rest of the night is uneventful. Day 2. Wake up, still a little weirded out from last night's events. Whatever, probably just some weirdo, won't happen again. Start out the day just fine, eat breakfast, go for a morning hike with everyone, except Mary, who left that morning in her own car. Smoke a little, head back, all the while feeling awfully paranoid that someone was watching us. Start swimming. Sitting on the water trampoline. Look out into the forest. See someone standing there. They're pretty far away so I can't see who it is. I wave, they wave back, but the wave seemed real sluggish, almost slow motion. Look back at group, there's only 5 of us total at the lake. Me, Aiden, Luke, Mark, and Chris. Everyone else went to smoke. I assume it's one of them. Look back at where the person was, they're gone now. I guess they moved on. Everyone who was gone suddenly shows up. How'd you guys get around the lake so quickly? I ask them. They're confused, says they were just in the house eating. What? I waved at you though. Dude, what are you talking about? We've all been inside. Okay, what? Cousin Luke looks worried. He looks out into the forest. I'm weirded out now. Level 5 nope alert right now. Something's up. I get off water tramp and ask my cousin what's up. Not right now, I'll tell you later. Okay, whatever. It's about 6 or 7 p.m. Meanwhile, Chris, Henry and Jesse go out to the shed to get a shovel. They want to dig a hole so we can have a fire pit tonight. Gone for a while. Suddenly hear a screech from the forest. More screeches. Luke tells us all to go the fuck inside now. We all nope our way to the house. What the fuck is going on? He says nothing at first. They aren't supposed to come out during the day, he says to himself. They're breaking the rules. WTF are you saying? Hear a banging at the door. It's Chris screaming at the top of his lungs. Open the damn door, Jesus Christ, you douchebags, open the door. Luke opens the door and Chris barges in. Henry and Jesse nowhere to be found. Where are Henry and Jesse? Luke asks. Hell if I know, I got separated and these things fucking start chasing me. Luke goes around the house and locks all the doors and all the windows and closes all the shutters. We all go upstairs. Look out window down the hill. See dozens of figures walking around near the edge of the woods. It wasn't even walking, it was more like they were jittering their way around. Like they were having seizures while walking. Even more standing near the shed on the other side of the woods. Just standing there. What the hell, Aiden says. What? I ask, but I don't need him to answer. Henry and Jesse are on the path on their way from the cabin, as if nothing is wrong. They're just fucking walking really slow. Walk up to the door and try to get in. Start knocking. Shouldn't we let them in? Still knocking, non-stop. Luke is silent for a moment like he's seen this before but doesn't want to tell us. It isn't them, he says. WTF? What do you mean it isn't them? Still knocking, louder now, more than just one hand, like a bunch of people knocking together. That's not them. It looks like them but it isn't. We need to fucking leave. We wait until morning, but no one sleeps. Knocking all throughout the night. Endless screeching from everywhere, eventually screeching dies down. Knocking fades too by the morning. But Henry and Jesse are still there. I look outside from the window above the front door. They're both staring straight at the door. Suddenly they both look up right at me. Their eyes look gone, just deep empty sockets. Jaws are slack. Fucking stare into my soul. There aren't eyes but I can still feel them looking, even after I leave the window. I will never forget that look. Around 9 a.m. Luke decides it's time to go. Luke grabs his gun, gives us all a golf club that belongs to his dad. We're all just going to run to the cars, don't look around, just go. He tells me to drive the Range Rover and Chris is going to drive the sedan. After designating where everyone is going to sit, we all pile up by the back door. Luke opens it slightly, looks around, then starts booking it to the car. We all follow. Get in the cars. See Henry and Jesse running after us, but they aren't running. Almost like they're sliding across the grass while standing up. Like puppets on strings. We get in the car. Jasper won't get into the car because he doesn't want to leave them behind. Luke fucking punches him in the face and throws him into the passenger seat of the sedan. We drive off, Henry and Jesse chasing us. Loud screeching from every fucking where. They almost drown out the sound of the engine. The screeches sound like what I imagine a man-bat would sound like. I see figures on the side of the road, and occasionally I see faces. They're exactly what Mary described. I wish I could forget them. They look gross, deformed, and improper. They all had slack jaws, but one side of the jaw usually hung lower than the other. Their shoulders were lopsided, their stance, and crooked, and their legs seemed broken and backwards, like a grasshopper's legs. Kept seeing them until we left the foresty area. Drive 90, all the way home. A few days after I got home I called my cousin and asked him what went down. He just kept telling me to forget it. I asked him about the things he said. Like when under his breath he said they're breaking the rules, always just tells me to forget it ever happened because it would be better that way.
Alright, here goes. Not gonna pre-write because fuck that noise. Have dad that lives in the middle of the Ozark Mountains, stay with him for a few weeks to a month every summer. Mom has custody, but she and dad are on good terms. House isn't great mate, but he made a lot of the furniture out of local cedar and he's a pretty skilled carpenter/engineer type. Has his own sawmill and wood shop that brother was with me, used to make candlesticks and tables and things when we got older. House had this little screen wall porch, important later, on the side 90 degrees away from the door. It has a sliding door, but it's busted so you have to walk about 20 feet around the house each time you want to go in or come out. Anyway. B11/12. Few days left until we go home to mom's, excited to go home and play vidya. It's nighttime. Me and bro's bedroom is on second floor, only window has good view of front yard, red, trees to left and right, driveway, and road to front. Trying to fall asleep, but too excited. Hear dad and stepmom talking downstairs, which is weird cause they're always asleep by 10ish. front_door_opening.wave. This is weird. Look out window, see dad walk out with a flashlight in his old double barrel, don't know model, sorry/K/Amandos. Goes to leftmost tree lean and shines light here and there. Debate waking brother up about this, but he gets pissy real easy, hear gunshot and nearly shit myself whipping back to window. Look back in time to see dad thumb another shell into the breech. Whatever he was doing, he wanted 2 shots at the ready. So nervous I actually hear the clack of the gun. See him walk backwards all the way to house, trying to hold his gun and flashlight up at same time. It was one of those big clunk fucking ones that used the massive battery. He makes it uneventfully, I'm too wired to fall back asleep. Next few days, he seems weird and more quiet than usual, doesn't want to do any of the stuff he normally leaps at with us. We left a few days later and I was too chikunshit to ask him about it. The next year we visited, though, things were different around the house. Drive up to his house. Rode there with a half-grown English Mastiff taking up 80% of the back seat. Friendly enough to us, but slobbery. Finally make it around late afternoon, suddenly. Lights. Fucking everywhere. Floodlights at each corner of the house. Lights on posts. Goddamn Christmas lights strung up around the outside. Honest to God watchtowers set up on 3 sides of the house. Sawmill's been moved. New platform on top of the wood shop. 4 or 5 new guns, all high-powered rifles, again, no model because I was a kid. All I have now is a 700 ADL for deer hunting. My fuck, there's even a concrete bunker. It's/K's wet dream. In for fake, I shit you not, my dad's place is still set up like this. It was in the days before camera phones, early 2000s, and it never occurred to me to take pictures of his shame until now. Ask him what it's all for. Platforms, deer stands, 4 of them. All within 200 feet of the house. Bunker, auto maintenance, nice roof on your auto maintenance pit. The lights, to make the place more cheery, or to blind commercial aircraft. The dogs and guns, to keep weirdos off the property. The ways he answered my questions still bugs me. They sounded 100% rehearsed. Anyway, thanks for reading past all the expository bullshit. Needed to set the stage for next post. Right. Now for the shit my dad doesn't like talking about. Go to bed that night, there's a new heavy curtain on the window. Why? Because the lights are always on. Wake up that night to a gunshot, look outside. My eyes.jpg. See dad on one of the deer stands, working the bolt on one of his new guns. Something's up. Next morning he's practically vegetative. Ask him about last night. Trying to get us a deer to barbecue. Shrug.gif. Ask if I can go outside and play. He thinks for a moment and says yes, but not to go off into the woods. Super intense eyes when he said that last thing, despite being raccoon-eyed. Go outside, make a beeline for the stand he was on last night. Feet clink on pile of .30 shells. If you've been doing your math, all the new gear plus those expensive ass rounds should be adding up to quite a sum. His job's not terrible, but that crap must have been expenside. Fast forward a few days. Dad got a pig from one of his neighbors, closest one is at least 5 miles in any direction, and we spent the day learning to barbecue properly. Dad has the shoddy on standby and Fonzie, his old German shepherd, nearby the entire time. That evening we're all sitting on the screen porch, licking our fingers when Fonzie starts barking his head off, staring at the ravine behind the house. The dogs on the other side start barking and growling too. Dad starts up and nearly knocks the plate off his lap. He grabs the gun and stares down the ravine. Cat, stepmom, take the boys inside. Suddenly hear sound of branches snapping from trees near the bunker. We're being flanked. Brother and I are swapping nervous glances, just about pissing ourselves. Without a word, Dad hands Cat Fonzie's leash and takes the rear while she leads us inside. Once inside the greenhouse it's straight shot to the door and the 6 of us go in. Dad grabs a flashlight, a new gun, and a bug-out bag filled with rounds and goes outside with Fonzie. Cat tries to keep us entertained with a stash of old kids' tapes, but neither of us are interested. Brother wants to go out and help Dad. I'm pissing my britches. For about half an hour it's nothing but gunshots, growling, and the occasional yell from Dad. The window-mounted AC is running and there's a weird smell to the air. Old barbecue, gun smoke, and something absolutely awful. Not trying to copy Opie, but it's almost exactly how he put it. Rank horse sweat mixed with something like old manure and hot death and stale piss. Kat decides to risk it and opens the door to see what's going on. When she does, the house is immediately flooded with the stench. She shouts out to him, he barks back, "Keep that closed." She keeps that closed. Eventually bodily needs overcome fear and I walk off to the bathroom. It's set on the wall that faces the ravine. This next bit's gonna sound seriously fake, but it's the reason I keep all my windows covered to this day. As I'm shitting, I look up at the bathroom mirror. Something in the reflection looks back at me. It's illuminated by the light from inside and outside, so I get a better look at it than I ever would have wanted to. Bullet-shaped head, but not in the traditional sense. Stand a 9mm round on its base and you get the idea. Rough gray-red fur with a forward-facing whirl, that little swirly thing on the back of your head, and what looks like a slash on one side. Eyes? Fuck me, the eyes are the absolute worst, just no thank you. Its face is sort of lopsided, but the nose is large and squashed, the mouth is hanging open a little and the teeth are sort of tombstone-shaped and cruddy. My butthole nearly explodes from the sheer force of my fear shits. I just sit, shit and stare at the thing's reflection, my mind failing to change gears. Then it leans forward and I hear the clunk of its face hitting the glass above my head. Thanks for reading. The more I type this out, the more comes back, like it always does in stories like this, yada yada. I'm at my mom's on winter break right now, it's in a woods, and I have a thick blanket tacked around my window. Let's continue. The new source of input recalibrates my brain, it realizes that this thing is right the fuck behind me. I start wailing like a banshee, hear the thing gurgle through the glass. Flail sprint my way through the bathroom door, trip on my pants, still around my ankles, and get a chunk of wood from the kitchen's shitty particle board floor lodged in my knee. Too scared to feel pain or embarrassment, Kat and brother come into the kitchen, see me panting and sobbing, sprawled on the floor, pants around my feet, staring at the bathroom. I didn't even have time to wipe. Kat asks what happened and as I pull my pants up, Dad comes barging through the door. Guess he heard my screams and thought I was being befuckled by some big gurgling monkey dog bastard. He sees me on the floor, bleeding, and immediately starts yelling about how I raised that much of a racket over a busted knee. I see his fear/relief/anger and raise him the hurt and pure terror of a tween that lost a staring contest with a fucking monster. Tell him about thing I saw. He tells me and my brother to go upstairs. Don't remember much after that except that he went back out, left one of the other dogs with us, and that Kat helped clean and bandage my knee. The next day, Dad wouldn't let us go outside, but the smell was still in the house. He called our mom up to come to Springfield, halfway meet-up point, the next day. Pig was gone, about 80 pounds of exquisitely barbecued leftovers and carcass that Dad had promised the neighbor in exchange for the pig. One of the dogs was missing. Dad stayed inside with us that night. I was too afraid to go downstairs to bathroom, so he gave me a milk bottle and an extra blanket as a privacy tent. And that's really it. He took us to Springfield the next day after making us promise not to tell Mom. I might not have shown it very well, but he loved the hell out of us and didn't want her to stop bringing us. I was there again a year or so ago. We barbecued in his new, hand-built, smokehouse, drank, shot the shit, but the second I brought up the incident I've been posting it killed the mood immediately. All he said was, "We haven't been having any trouble for the last few," and went back to drinking. It's worth mentioning though, that there's another new addition to his place. A concrete slab off past the trees in the back of the house. It's not raised off the ground, and it's not very cleanly laid out. It's about 5 feet wide, 6 or 7 long, and if you kick up the dirt around it you dig up a thin layer of black shit, like soot. Now I'm not saying that he managed to kill one of the things, burned its corpse in a pit, and buried it all under concrete. But if he did, I hope it was the big gurgly bastard.
I'm not gonna green text. but I'll tell you about the time I had some shady people block me on a bridge out in the middle of nowhere. I was driving with my girlfriend on an old logging road. We were supposed to meet up with a camping group that had headed out earlier in the day. We couldn't head out until later, and that led to us driving there in the dark. We got on an old logging road, headed up the way we were supposed to go, but it was a 40-plus minute drive up into the mountains. Ahead of us, there was a pickup truck. You could just barely see the tail lights, and we kept our distance. Eventually we get to a bridge. It was a one-lane bridge that was probably 90 feet long. As we approach, the lights reflected off the tail lights and plate, and we could see they'd stopped on the bridge, no lights on. The truck was dark and nobody was moving inside. After maybe 30 seconds of waiting at the bridge entrance, the truck door opened. Out comes the passenger. A somewhat normal-looking rural type. But he comes back to the car, and doesn't say anything. I roll down my window and ask if there's a problem. He says, "Yeah, we're broken down." I said okay, and he went back to the truck. We're in the middle of nowhere, 30 to 40 minutes into the mountains on an old, rarely used logging road. Sitting there, waiting for these guys to move. The guy goes back to the truck and just gets in. They're not out front with the hood open. They just continue to sit there. We turned out our headlights and just waited. Eventually I decide to get out and walk up to the truck and ask if they need some help. But as I get out, both of the doors open. There were 3 guys in the truck. They all 3 get out and start walking back at me. I was no-guns at this point, FYI. I ask if they'd mind just pushing the truck off the bridge so we can pass. They said they're working on it, and it'll only be a few minutes. Then one of them goes back towards my car, where my girlfriend was sitting. The other 2 are trying to talk to me, as I realize the third guy is walking back towards my girlfriend in the truck. I just turn and walk back behind him. Maybe 20 feet behind him. The other guys seem like they're trying to keep my attention. I ignore them and walk back anyway. When I get there, the guy had already done a circle around my car, seeming to be looking at what's in there. I asked him what he's doing, and he didn't say anything. So I asked, "What's going on here?" And he just mutters something about whether my car's narrow enough to pass. This was bullshit, since the bridge was barely wide enough for their truck. You could barely get a motorcycle past them. Then he walks back up to the truck. I open the door and tell my girlfriend we're getting out of here. I don't say anything else. I just get in, turn the car on, do a 5-point turnaround, and start heading back down the road. As we're going, I see the truck's lights go on, and the red tail lights as they get the truck moving. They're crossing the bridge, finally. I stop, we discuss going back over the bridge now that the guys have moved their truck. We turn out the lights and wait a minute to see that they're continuing down the logging road. When they're out of sight, I turn the car around, and head back to the bridge. As we're slowly crossing this one-lane bridge, my headlights catch the glint of the truck coming back toward us. No headlights, just driving slowly toward the bridge. I gas it, trying to get across the bridge before they can block it again. I make it to the mouth of the entrance just as their truck is approaching the bridge, lights still off. 3 guys in the truck. They're in the center of the road, and not making any effort to pull right and make room. But I'm able to get by them. The truck stops as we pass, and the tail lights go off. About 10 minutes later we get to the camp, and the truck drives by, lights off, slowly. Luckily 2 of the guys at the camp had brought pistols. We tell them what happened, and the 3 guys go out to the road. The truck never came back. The end. I'm gonna dump one of my stories for Jarl. I'll leave it up to you to believe it or not after your own mind, but for me this was the biggest nope moment I've had. Some background first. This happened in Boden, Sweden, a couple of years back. Boden is known for one thing, and one thing only: military forts. It was long thought of as the key to northern Sweden, the first thing the Saudis would roflstomp if they ever came charging. Those forts were secret as fuck in the past, and for some time one of the forts were used to store a large part of Sweden's gold reserve. However, after the Cold War ended, the forts became even more obsolete than before and were decommissioned. Anyway, the story. B21. Hang out with female friend that is more like the sister I never had. We are both scouts and have been for as long as we both can remember. Bored as fuck. Decide to go recon a cool campsite for the coming Halloween scare hike. My friend, let's call her H, knows a lot of cool old forts and trench systems. Drive off in my car, which was perfectly fine and had gone through inspection without a hitch only a week before. Decide to check out the nearest old fort. Park the car a couple of 100 meters from the old fort because someone had placed big ass stones as a crude roadblock on the dirt road leading to the fort. The fort is dug like pick related with the exception that only there is no road up to the fort. Pick is another fort near Boden. Walk, climb up to the fort from the right slope that's somewhat accessible. Any thoughts of recon for a campsite has soon been replaced by thoughts of exploration. It's about midday, but the daylight is waning fast due to northern Sweden. Luckily we brought flashlights. Eventually locate a hole in the fence big enough for us to get through. Explore a bit, though all doors are locked either with massive padlocks or internal locks. Start to head back the way we came in. A thick door that we both were sure had been closed before is now slightly ajar. Not by much, just a couple of centimeters. We haven't heard any door opening or anyone else being here. This is a door about 1.5 meter wide, 2.5 meters tall and made entirely out of 1 decimeter of solid steel. And on rusty hinges it looks like. Remember that H told me before that the local wildlife seems to shun this place. Okay. Getting a real bad feeling about this right now. We both keep our distance but our curiosity gets the better of us. We both try to peek inside. Pitch fucking dark inside. Except I sense something move inside. Don't really know how I know this, but I just get a very weird feeling. Like something is staring at us from inside. We both aim our flashlight and thumb them on. Flashlights both give a short burst of light and then go dead as doorknobs. And we put in new batteries before we went out. In the short picosecond we have light, I managed to get a glimpse of something. A grey blackish humanoid shade that looks more like a beast than a man. At the same time something in my mind pushes the primal predator panic button. Nope, 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 nope. I'm not sure what H saw, but she is white as a fucking sheet and as damn near panic as I have ever seen her. We both scramble out without saying a word to each other. We both must have broken the record on 200 meters panicked sprint. Don't know about H, but I felt a something. Can't describe it more than a terrible sense of hate following us. Get in the car. I turn the key. Nothing. Try to turn it again. The car won't start. The headlight won't even turn on. Eventually, after turning the key frantically again and again for the longest 2 minutes in my life, the car starts. We get the hell out of Dodge with gravel flying everywhere as I floor it until we get back on the main road. Later learned through other friends that there has been other similar occurrences, some hearing a faint, but very much mocking laughter coming from beyond that door, and others feeling watched when they are near the fort. The door have never been ajar before or after though, and it has always been locked when anyone has tried to open it. Damn, I still get the shivers just by thinking of it. And it has been 5 years since that happened. I can add that neither H nor I have been back inside the fence of that place.
No Innawoods threads? Be me. Camp counselor at Boy Scout Camp in Michigan. Camp is in the middle of nowhere. At this time THRE was only a few buildings in the camp. Camp is fucking huge and has 2 lakes in it. In charge of Wilderness Survival Merit Badge. Pretty sweet, teach kids how to start fires with batteries and shit like that. Last thing for badge is going Innawoods for a night and surviving off of nothing but a trash bag. I set up the spot a mile into the woods. Used that spot for like 3 years with no issues. Built a giant ass fort for the hell of it. Proud.gif. Every year I go to check out the site and make sure everything is in order a day before we all go out. Decide to practice what I preach and take a few kids with me because, never go alone in the woods. Kids are stoked because they get a head start on the others. Takes a while to get there, we arrive at like 8 p.m. My fucking fort is trashed. Pissed.jpg. Poles that were like 4 feet in the ground were ripped up. See gash marks on the logs. WTF.png. Marks are deep and do not look like a bear, I know this kind of shit. Walk around site and notice these gashes everywhere on trees and rocks. Getting freaked now. Starts to get dark and me and the kids finish cleaning up the site for tomorrow. Kids ask me what made the mess. Don't want to freak kids out and say, no fucking clue, I'm spooked, so I just tell them it was a bear or mountain lion or some shit, believe me. About to walk back. Notice something in the leaves. Fucking ripped up raccoon. Head missing, scratches everywhere. Fresh as delivery pizza. Oh fuck.jpg. Kids see it and start getting scared. Tell them to make a lot of noise as we walk back. BSA doesn't allow guns, but I have AM9 bayonet I bought off army surplus. Make it halfway when we hear a howl. Deep as fuck, not wolf or coyote. Chills down my spine. Start walking faster. Hear howl again. Closer this time. Start power walking with kids. Reach pavilion right as it gets dark. Send kids back to respected campsites. Stay in pavilion kitchen all night. Swear I hear scratching at the door. Don't sleep a wink. Tell my boss the next day a bear just fucked up my campsite. Say it's too dangerous to go back that night. He believes me and I just set up a survival camp in an unused campsite near the pavilion. Kids are stoked that they don't have to go into woods to get badge. Kids that were with me yesterday are less enthusiastic. Nothing happens the rest of the week and I pass the kids that went with me even though they didn't do some requirements. Not the first or last thing that happened to me at my years in the camp, but the time I felt in the most danger. Well, I guess I'll share another story of the BSA camp adventures. Be me. Still camp counselor. Don't do wilderness survival anymore. Do Indian badge. 2010 anniversary shit and I decided it was cool. Super into Indian legends in Michigan. Kids I teach just do the badge because it, limited edition. Whatever.gif. One kid is really into this shit. Talk to him a lot and he is pretty cool. Let's call him Little Bear, he was fat, black and 13. He is in wild mess survival. That's me shit.png. Friend does the night hike now and I convince him to bring me along. Fucking astronomy fags go with us as well due to prior incidents, won't get into that, but it was a shit show. Stop every 10 minutes to look at gay stars. Get pissed and leave with Little Bear and a few others. Spot is about a half a mile out. Opposite side of the property from 3 years ago. Reasons above. Forest gets super quiet, no bugs or coyotes yipping like normal. Wilderness survival /K/prepper instincts tingling. Something's not right. Whip out my knife from my new leather sheath. Leather making was under same pavilion as Indian badge, so I got it for free. Feels good, man. Knife out, flashlight out. Feel like solid snake. Something hits my foot, daft.png. It's a rock. Walk for a few more midnights. Kid complains that other kid is throwing shit at him. Other kid denies it and a fight breaks out. Friend breaks them up. Feel another rock hit my back. Shine light. No one there. Get to camp area. Fort V2 is waiting for me. Kids build shelters and then sit by fire. Rocks still now and then hit us or around us. Think it's the astronomy kids fucking with us. At about 2 AM rocks still coming in now and then. It can't be the kids. Kinda spooked. Little Bear is convinced it's some Indian spirit or mystical animal or some shit, freaks out the other kids. Thanks a lot, mate. Let all 15 kids into my fort at night. Me and friend attend to fire till dawn. Rocks thrown until like 6 AM. Never see anything. Pack up at 7. Rocks fucking everywhere. How are these many rocks in the forest, my friend asks. We are about a mile from the lake where these stones are normally at. No clue. Little Bear is fucking stoked. Grabs a bunch of rocks as souvenirs. We head back to pavilion for breakfast. Ask Faggy astronomy counselor if he was fucking with us last night. He doesn't even know where my camp was and was pissed at me for leaving him. Get bitched out by boss. Little Bear and other kids that went Innawoods freak out rest of camp at breakfast. Legends begin on how me and my friend fought off Bigfoot with fire defending the fort. Become heroes for no reason. Rest of counselors hate me. MFW Bigfoot fucked up my camp social life.
OK/X/so all of my life my family has always been pretty in tune with spirits/entities and overall bizarre things. All stemming from our Irish/pagan heritage and some psychic abilities that some family members have. So I've grown up experiencing some overall unbelievable things, but the story I'm about to tell you definitely takes the fucking cake. Be me 17-year-old jock, living in Bumfuck, Ohio. Cold early winter night after a school basketball game or some shit. Me and some of my other jock N-words hear some spoopa stories about some old train trestle down this, out of the way dirt road. Place is a known satanic/KKK meeting place because small town Ohio is fucked. Confirmed story of a couple hanging themselves from said train tracks back in early 80s. Even better. I get the bright idea for all of us to pile up in my truck and investigate. I have 4 friends with me. Now all of us are pretty grown for how young we were. So after about a 20-minute drive down some back roads we come to the dirt road where the train trestle is. We turn down the road and it's the kind of place that puts the hairs up on the back of your neck. It was early winter, so no leaves on the trees, everything was barren and just looked dead. Traveling down the road we see the tracks come into view, my headlights coming level with it until we head down a little hill that runs below the trestle. Shit's spooky, man. Park my truck directly below them. After about 5 or 10 minutes of us excitingly talking and fucking with each other, we start to get quiet and actually trying to witness something. My car was off, so the only things you could hear was our breathing. And the occasional leftover insects outside. About 20 minutes go by of listening. Off to our right in this thicket of woods about 50 yards we see this blue light appear. The fuck? I see it and I don't say anything just to see if the others would see it or not. My friend's riding shotgun sees it and says something to the rest. At this point all of us are peering at this what looks like a blue lantern light swinging in and out and around the tree trunks in this thicket. Instantly we all think it's some Amish fuck, dicking around in the woods. Because Amish do dumb shit like that. I flip my lights on and they're directly facing the thicket. Don't see shit. Flip lights back off, blue light's gone. 5 minutes pass, we start seeing the blue light again. Now we are just quietly watching this blue orb dancing around in these trees. Every has shut the fuck up. Another 5 minutes pass and an orange light appears along with the blue light. Oh fuck, it's got a friend. So you have me who has seen some pretty ghostly things in my life, and you have my 4 paranormal virgin buddies witnessing their first event. I'm loving every second, but you can tell they're starting to get shook. My windows are still down and all of a sudden it gets real quiet outside. Like deafeningly quiet. One of my friends from the back blurts out that he thought he saw a shadow figure peek out about 20 yards in front of my car on the bend in the road. He says this, we all look, it's still deadly quiet outside, and I start to get this real uneasy feeling. A sound of gravel and dirt scuffling outside erupts from the right side of my car. Oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck. My badass self starts my truck up and nopes the fuck out of there. Burning rubber down this dirt road, all 5 of us were breathing heavy. All saying WTF, did that just happen, let's get the fuck out of here. We get to the end of the road and stop at the stop sign. Me having a few minutes to gather what happened and feeding off my adrenaline and the fear of the others. Me being the driver. I turn to them and I say, we're going back. I'm the only one down for this because I want to try to witness it again and try to understand what exactly is going on. To this fucking day it was the worst decision me and my friends have ever made. So we drive back down some roads so we could enter the Forsaken Road the same way as the first time. Make our way back down and park in the same spot underneath the trestle. All of us are a mix of nervous / excited / and terrified. Proceed to roll windows down. Shut truck off. And we all go eyes wide, mouths shut and ears open. The natural nighttime noises are going on outside, giving us a false sense of normalcy and comfort. About 30 minutes pass and at this point I start cursing myself for being so scared and abandoning a rare experience. Right when I'm about to call it a night, a familiar sight appears. Off to our 2 o'clock in the thicket we see the blue light reappear. We watch it intently dancing and dipping in front of trees. Behind trees, it's bright enough to where it's illuminating a small area around it and casting dim shadows. Not long before the orange N-word orb joins in. So now we're witnessing 2 unexplained lights interacting and dancing / moving around with each other. Now the fucked up nope part is about to happen. I will take what I saw that night to my grave. As I'm typing this my body is getting the chills and goosebumps. You can believe me or not, I honestly don't give a fuck, but me and 4 others witnessed it that night. As we're watching the lights, shit starts to get real quiet outside. Nothing is moving and the insects have stopped talking. Now the best way I can describe what happens next is about 15 to 20 feet in front of my truck. I see what I would describe as a 6-foot-tall flash of lightning. It makes no noise but it lit up the surrounding road, woods, and inside of my car. Everything happened so fast. The mini lightning hit. It flashed, and as the 5 of us are reacting in shock and horror. Out of the corner of my eye I see this pale-skinned, real thin figure / creature whatever the fuck. Stand up right beside my driver's side door and it books it to the back of my truck. Ungodly fucking speed on this thing. Nope nope nope. Turn my truck on as fast as I can. Pedal to the fucking floor and we're out of there. Everyone is either screaming / crying or just silent. No one knows, not even me, what the fuck just happened. My friend in the passenger seat points his hand up and points to my window and starts screaming. At this point I scream and say, dude fucking stop, shut the fuck up. At this point it wouldn't surprise me if that M4 was running beside my car. We get to the end of the road and he says, dude fucking look. I finally look and there is this nasty fucking handprint sitting on the glass on the outside of my window. We all look at it in disbelief. I look at it and am like, holy fuck, we have proof. Don't give a fuck. I pull over on the side of the main road, we all hop out of the car to inspect this thing. Has 2 elongated fingers and can make out some grooves on the imprint. We all snap pictures of this thing just so we have evidence. Nope the fuck back to our friend's house and none of us sleep at all that night, too busy talking and trying to get a grip on what we witnessed. Give me a few and 3 post the picture of the handprint I captured that night. Alright, sorry for the shit quality, but this was taken back in 2011 with a shit iPhone. To give you guys reference, we circled the print. The ridge below the fingers is about 4 inches long and the fingers themselves are about 5 to 6 inches long. You can also note the possible tip imprints of 2 other digits. So possibly 4 fingers. If the image was clearer you'd be able to see grooves on the imprint.
Hey, X, I don't really know what the procedure is on this board, but I just had a fucking scary experience happen to me and my mates. I'm from, by the way. If you guys don't know, there is a long-time tradition in northern Michigan called polar bearing. It is pretty much just camping in a dugout snow cave or tent in the middle of winter. Me and my friends went up to Gaylord, I know, stupid name, to hike, camp in the forest. We all are major shitheads and brought our AR-15s, various handguns and my one buddy's Saiga he had just bought. Our plan was to hike to the campsite and then go shooting varmints later in the day. We got to the trailhead and got our shit ready for a hike. There was no one else on the sign-up sheet for staying the night, so we were all pretty happy. We hiked in for a few miles until we found the campsite. The place was a fucking reek, shit and trash thrown everywhere. We were pissed at the previous hikers for leaving such a mess. Boy Scouts leave not trace shit. After we had finished cleaning the campsite, we split into groups to go find small game. I went with my buddy Dakota. He had the Memagan 2000, to try and track down some small critters. This might be the time to tell you that I had a 22 on me for red squirrels. They are some tasty buggers. We start walking through the woods until my buddy finds some prints in the snow and mud. They are a bunch of coyote tracks. But I thought they looked a bit weird as the paw was too big and the spaces separating them were a bit off. Dakota didn't care that much about specifics and all he cared about was bagging a few coyotes. Later that evening it was getting dark and I wanted to go back to camp. We did not have NVGs or any of that fancy shit, so the chances of getting something was minuscule. I had been getting bad vibes all day because of all the black squirrels I saw. They are major bad luck, and if you kill them you supposedly get cursed. I digress. My buddy Dakota wants to stay out longer and he and I bicker until we hear a familiar yipping coyotes. Dakota gets his stupid fucking shotgun up and shoots the slug where the yipping was coming from. I scream at him to stop because we hadn't even seen the little buggers yet, let alone had the time to aim at one-eyed Tum on the spotlight I had brought. Hack a giant-ass hid flashlight, and start surveying the forest. I see a coyote in the edge of the opposite tree line, but it's a bit odd. For one, it didn't bolt when it hears the shotgun and it was on its hind legs. The thing was standing up and on closer inspection was way larger than a coyote. My friend shot at it, but it ran just as he fired. It fucking ran like on 2 legs. We were super freaked at this point and booked it to the camp. As we ran we heard it howling and almost pissed ourselves. We made it back to camp and told the rest of our friends what we saw and that we needed to book it out of there. They laughed at us and told us that we had too much to drink. We kept on trying to get him to leave, but all they did was laugh at us. Until my friend Kyle saw it. It was at the edge of the campfire light just watching us. Kyle was having none of it and shot the fucker with his Glock. Wrong move that just seemed to piss it off, and it started screeching and ran out of sight. All of us are scared out our minds by now. We don't even pack, we just grab our rifles and start heading for the trailhead. We haul ass, but whatever that thing was, it was fast. We heard it coming from behind us. I was taking up the rear and swiveled just as the thing was 5 feet from me. I unicaded my entire mad into the thing and it dropped. I had already soiled myself at this point and started running as fast as I could with the rest of my friends. We heard more of the howling the rest of the way, but never saw another one of those things. We made it to the car, and once I got cell signal I called 911 and told them what happened. The operator just thought I was drunk. So my buddies go to the nearest ranger station and tell them what had happened. They say some shit like we ran into some starving coyotes. That was no coyote. They let us stay until dawn and then take us back to our camp in a Kubota. On the way, we find my spent brass and a shitton of blood. They say I must have hit one, no shit, and the others dragged its body away to eat. Our camp is a total loss, shit thrown everywhere. Rangers help us clean up and still insist it was coyotes. Just got back at 6 o'clock and have no idea what to think about this. Isn't the Michigan dogman a known cryptid? https://en.m.wikipedia.org/wiki/Michigan_dogman. 10-year cycle. Last cited 2007. It's 2017. I'm a bit spooked.
Years ago, thought I was in love. Hot engaged to an Irish hottie. Good times. Her stepdad liked me, we drank together. They lived in a farming community. Next to Amish, strangely enough. They owned property, about 80 acres or so. 60% of the property is wooded. Stepdad and I are walking in said woods. He's kinda half drunk, half serious, and he starts going off about how the woods are in his blood. Oh yeah? Are you related to Woody the Woodpecker? Let's call him Appleseed. Appleseed chuckles and says no, he's part Maliseed, a tribe from here in Maine. That's cool. Is that why you don't get sunburned? No, it means I turn into a fucking wolf. Hassa, no. Stop in my tracks and grab his shoulder. You can't be that drunk already. TM, not kidding. Let me show you my altar. Oh fuck, Indian juju. I follow him quite a ways down in. So far I can't hear cars anymore, or really much more than some annoying birds. He leads me to a clearing, man-made, that sits at the bend of a river. Rushing water. He stands near the edge, and places his hand on a carved stump. Lots of faces carved into it, birds, wolves, foxes, etc. It's not a totem pole, it's just a tree trunk with shit carved into it. Looks super old. He pats the side of it and asks me to come touch it too. Touch it, feels like slimy wood. Okay. He shakes his head. Be glad she loves you. You're as mortal as they come, my friend. Shrug. Means I won't be chilling with wood, I guess. He chuckles and we go back to the house for dinner. A few weeks later, I get a call from his wife asking me if I've seen him. No, he's your husband. Don't get smart, he's been missing for too long. Come over with the fiancé and we go down into the woods. Blood and guts everywhere. Sheep body parts all over. I stop in the path, as we get closer. You two should go back. Oh fuck, I want to go back. They go back up the hill. I grab a branch from the side of the path and hold it like a club. Get closer to where his altars were. No birds. Step into the clearing, and I spot the altar he showed me, caked in blood. Sheep's head resting on top of it. The ground is covered in shreds of his clothing. Appleseed is nowhere to be found. There's a fire going though, in a rock pit that he made, I guess. He's got a piece of stone in the middle of it that's making the fire green and blue. I can hear a bunch of rustling in the bushes all around me. There's a feeling in me, like I should run. My feet stay planted as I hold the branch up, ready to swing. Appleseed steps out from the bushes behind me. Turn and swing. He catches the branch. He's like 53 or some shit. I'm 23 or some shit. Holy shit. He's naked, by the way. Ugh. Apple seed is covered in blood. It's caked under his nails. He's got it in his hair. His balls have blood on them. He smiles to me, his teeth are bright yellow. Told yet. He says, tugging the branch out of my hands like I'm a toddler holding a wild bat. I step back from him as he kneels down to pick up his glasses. Why? Had to prove something to you. What the fuck could killing sheep have to do with proving anything to me? Had to prove that you don't belong in this family. Good point, Ethan. I leaned over and grabbed his shirt. Here. Clean your balls off. I basically died on my way up the hill. I felt him following me the whole way. I didn't look back, but I could hear his feet on the twigs and branches in the path. He stayed a breath space away from me the whole way. Get back up to the girls. He's just camping. Guy's stuff, better leave him alone. Broke up with fiancé, found out later she was cheating on me anyway. Don't go in the woods on a full moon.
Today I want to share a story with /B/ about my winter deep in the Yukon with my grandfather and the strange things that occurred during those dark, frozen months. Quick note, this story is a little long. About 3 years ago, when I was at the spry age of 18, I had decided that I wanted to take a year off of school before going to university, do a bit of soul searching if you will. Well, as it happened, my father decided that this would be a great opportunity. You see, my grandfather Dana had been trying to get me to go out to his cottage for a few years now, to learn a little about yourself and your heritage. Now, my grandfather is the toughest son of a bitch I have ever seen in my life. An example. When I was 15, my family took me skiing in Jasper and my grandfather tagged along. During that trip, Dana hit a fallen log that had been ever so lightly covered in snow and plowed straight into a spruce tree. Tore his lip open down to the cheek. Once we caught up to him and started freaking out and talking of getting an ambulance, he just calmly stood up, told us, while his lip was hanging open enough to see his teeth, that he would be fine and was going to go back to the lodge to patch himself up. As it turns out, this involved him skiing all the way back, grabbing a sewing needle and some fishing line, and stitching his own face back together in the bathroom mirror. An hour later he was back out on the slopes as though nothing had happened. He still has a vicious scar too. He is a born Swede, a massive guy, around 6 feet 6 inches, and pretty muscled despite being in his 60s. He's a pretty quiet guy and rather eccentric. He lives on his own in the middle of a frozen hellscape at a time in his life where most would be retired, so go figure. The main reason I hadn't gone with him sooner was because my mother was terrified of me going off to live with my crazy relative for any length of time, despite my father's assertion that I would be well taken care of and was old enough to fend for myself. This year was to be different though. Through some Herculean effort of coercion, likely involving the fact that I was moving out soon anyway, I was granted leave to go with him. My family lives in Alberta and my grandfather off in the northwestern Yukon, past the Minto mine if anyone here knows the area. It was arranged for me to fly out and meet up with my grandfather, who would then drive us out to his home. After landing, I was greeted with the amusing sight of my grandfather standing about a foot above the rest of the crowd, staring forward waiting for me. We had a quick greeting and before long had hopped in his truck and were making trail towards places where no roads go. We drove for a few hours, not much said between us, though that was pretty standard for him, and finally arrived at what appeared to be little more than a snowy plot near the tree line and away from the road. So where exactly is your cabin? I didn't see it on the way over. I asked him. He turned to me and smirked. About 3 days of hiking that way. He pointed into the trees. And so began day one of my adventure. Packs slung over my back and snow up to my calves, we began to walk. The first day went pretty normal, something that was not going to last, let me tell you now. Along the way he would point out animal tracks and different plants, giving me the basic wilderness survival rundown. Now, I had been raised on a small acreage outside of the, also small, town of Athabasca, so I was no stranger to the wilderness, but even still my grandfather's knowledge of the wilds seemed near encyclopedic. Anyway, the first day came to a close as the sun hung low in the sky and the snow glittered in the twilight, a beautiful vista if ever I had seen one. We found a small outcropping and built a fire, set a can of beans and some vegetable to cook and enjoyed the moment. I slept pretty soundly given the 20-ish weather. On the eve of the second day I was shaken awake and told to start walking. We don't want to spend more nights out here than we have to, it's only going to get colder and these woods are dangerous. Gathering up what I had, little more than a sleeping bag, cloths, some provisions, and 2 knives, we set off again. Now let me tell you, there is nothing more tiring than pushing through snow up to your crotch in the middle of the woods for hours and hours. I like to think I'm in okay shape, but by the time we stopped for a break some 4 hours later I was about ready to die. My grandfather, of course, seemed unfazed by it. It was around this time that I started to take note of a few things. For anyone who has lived near or spent a lot of time in the woods, you know it's a pretty lively place. Lots of noise and things moving around. Not here. In the winter, everything is still and quiet, a strange feeling when you've heard all your life that if things go quiet in the forest, something bad is near. The uneasiness was offset somewhat by the fact I was still trying to see to it that my lungs were going to explode in my grandfather's calm, uncaring demeanor. Soon enough we had set off again. A few more hours into walking I noticed an odd little cave down the hill we were on. The opening had huge icicles hanging down the front and a few bones could be seen scattered around the area. I turned to my grandfather and asked, pointing towards it, "Should we be worried about that?" At that he stopped and looked at it for a few moments before he just continued walking, saying nonchalantly, "No, long as we get a ways off before night it won't matter." When we finally settled for the night, I was sure I would be out before I hit the ground, but without so much as a glance I was told to wait. He was going to get firewood and start dinner. Sitting myself under a tree I watched as he walked off, leaving me alone in the dwindling light of day. All right, I can continue. Sitting there, listening to the fading sound of my grandfather walking further and further away, I couldn't help but notice how strangely suffocating the woods were. Now I had spent days camping before, sometimes with friends and other times alone, but this seemed different. Maybe it was the quiet, where the simple act of turning your head to the side seemed to echo through the trees. Maybe it was the way the evergreens, burdened with snow, seemed to blend into the growing gloom, forming strange and inky shapes in the dim light. Whatever it was, I started to get nervous, that kind of unease that comes when you feel like you're being watched, even though you think you're alone. Before my mind started to walk down those dark roads of thought, my grandfather came stomping back through the tree, bundle of broken branches under his arm. He set about showing me how to start a fire without matches or a lighter. He's old-fashioned like that, and soon enough we had a nice little campfire going. It wasn't until the heat off the fire hit me that I noticed how damn cold it was, my hands stiff and slight shivers going over me. We should reach the cabin by about this time tomorrow if we keep up this pace. Before we go any further though, I want you to understand something. Things are different out here, and if I tell you to do something I expect you to listen, understood? I nodded and told him my dad had given me the rundown before I left. Oh? How much did he tell you? Just to listen to whatever you said and to stay safe, I replied, unsure of where he was going with this. Ah, all right then. He didn't say anything for the rest of the night and I was too tired to ask. Despite my exhaustion, I found that I lied awake for quite a while, staring up at the sky and listening to the gentle crackling of the fire. I don't really know why. I should have had no problem sleeping after the day of hiking, cold notwithstanding, but regardless I found myself quite unable to drift off even after the moon had risen and shone over the area. It was around then that I heard something in the forest, like a sort of whispering. At first I figured it was just the wind, but looking at the treetops they weren't moving at all. I listened harder but couldn't make out what was being said, it was so faint. I sat up and looked around to see if something was there or if maybe my grandfather had been mumbling in his sleep, but when I tried to listen in again, it was silent. I figured it was just something on the breeze and lay back again. Sleep came soon after. I was once again woken by Dana as the sun had just begun its slow creep over the distant mountains. As we were gathering up our equipment, he asked me if I had slept well. I told him that the cold would take a little getting used to, but otherwise it was fine. He just sort of looked at me for a moment before grunting and tying off his pack. Once more we set off, deeper into the wilderness. The third day went without incident. It was only after yet more hours of tedious and exhausting trailblazing that we finally came into view of my grandfather's home. Built right up against a cliff face, no windows adorned it, just massive logs the whole way around. A small chimney rose up from the roof, easy to spot given that the trees had been cleared in about a 20-meter radius around the cabin, replaced with numerous small wooden stakes set at varying intervals. As we got closer I noticed that they were actually fence posts. Barbed wire was strung between them and every so often there was a much taller post, set a ways back from the fence. In the dim light I couldn't really make much out about it, though I was curious why they were there. Whatever the reason, I was in no mood to play 20 questions, I just wanted to get inside and sleep in a warm place. Before we could get in however, it seemed there were a few things to be done. My grandfather lifted one of the posts out of the ground allowing us to enter and told me to put it back and make sure it wasn't going to fall. He was going to go get the door open. It didn't take too long, the snow around the cabin was much less than the surrounding area making walking blessedly easier. After I finished I made my way around the side of the cabin and found my grandfather carefully taking down numerous little metallic things hung over the door. I could see them glinting in what little daylight was left but I couldn't make out what exactly they were supposed to be. Again, I was just too tired to really care and just wandered inside behind my grandfather as soon as he finished taking down the last one. "That bed over there'll be yours," he said, pointing to a small cot in one corner of the room. Without much more though I ambled over and went to sleep. I really should have savored it more as this was the last good night's rest I was going to have for a while. I woke up the next morning to a mostly dark room. A candle was set on the table in the middle of the cottage giving enough light for me to figure out where the door was. Opening it and stepping outside I was greeted to a bright, midday sun. Down the yard a ways I saw Dana finish clearing the excess snow from the plot of land. It was low enough that I could actually see the ground and a few feet beyond the fence the snow rose like a small wall all around us. The light, as well as something in the vein of 14 hours of sleep, allowed me to really take stock of the area around me. I could now see that the tall posts from the night before had been whittled down so that only pale heartwood remained. Carved all over each of them were words, thousands of them all tightly packed and varying from neat to nigh indecipherable scratches. Reading through it there really didn't seem to be a rhyme or reason to what was written down. Mostly it was just random words, mostly in Swedish and a few in Norwegian. I'm not fluent but I've picked up a little over the years. I guess Dana had noticed me staring at it as he had begun walking over. "What are these supposed to be?" I gestured to the other posts of a similar nature around the yard. They were part of an ordvag or word wall. It helps keep things calm at night. I wouldn't stare at them too long though, won't do your head much good. In case it wasn't already somewhat apparent, my grandfather was an odd sort. He never liked staying in towns or normal houses and almost always carried these little runes and charms on strings. I always found it neat and when I was younger I would often ask what they meant and I'd listen to the stories for hours. My mother always had a problem with him visiting. I'd overheard her talking to my dad about allowing Dana to fill my head with crazy nonsense on more than one occasion but he'd often shrug it off and say something along the lines of, "It's good for him to learn a little about Dad's culture." The point is that it was only after I really started to get a look at the cabin and the word wall that these things started to sink in. He was definitely a little odd at times. The first day we went out to chop a few trees down for firewood and he would very specifically point out which trees we were going to cut but only after pressing his ear to them and listening to see if it was unmarked. When I asked him what he meant by that he said that some trees were special to the forest and we shouldn't touch them, otherwise the tomtenisser would get angry and we really didn't want that. For those who don't know, tomtenisser are part of Scandinavian folklore. They basically look like garden gnomes and act sort of like Santa Claus, at least that's how they are portrayed now. Growing up my grandfather would tell me about these little monsters, about how they would chew open people's doors and windows in order to crawl into houses at night and whisper things to the sleeping person. The people would sometimes go crazy, wandering out into the woods or ranting in incoherent babble. Other times they would just be sort of different. Either way they were freaky little bastards but I stopped believing the stories around the same time I figured Santa was bunk. Dana really isn't known for his sense of humor so hearing him say that was more than a little strange. I sort of awkwardly laughed at it and he looked at me and said, "Think I'm joking? Keep that up and you won't be seeing the summer." That shut me up pretty quick. I still didn't particularly buy the stories, but I still made sure not to tap the trees that he said were marked. We finished loading up the sleds we had brought with us, and at that point Dana said, "Let's go this way, I want to show you something before we get back." Following him, it seemed to me like we were making a wide arc instead of going straight back, but I wasn't going to argue. As we walked, I noticed there were no animal tracks, as in absolutely none. Even on the way to the cabin I had at least picked up on a few prints from rabbits or moose and the like. When I asked why we hadn't come across any despite being so far in the woods, I was told that they don't like it here, no, to stay a ways off. Why's that? I asked back. These woods aren't safe for much of anyone after dark, least of all critters. After walking a while longer we reached a high at the edge of the section of forest we were. Dana pointed out beyond the now sparse tree line, what lay past it was the vast snowy rises and falls of the untamed wild. Honestly, it was one of the most beautiful things I had ever seen. There was an overturned tree and he motioned for me to sit on it. For a little while we just sat there taking in the view until he sighed. "Now I know you are going to be new to all this for a while, but I think you ought to know, things are different out here. I need you to trust me when I tell you something, or else it could get both of us killed, you understand?" I said I did. I figured that he had taken my reaction to him talking about Tom Tennisser to heart. He may be strange, but he means well, so I figured I would humor him and make things easier for the both of us. That would prove to be a very bad idea. Once we got back and finished stacking the firewood, Dana broke out more of our dwindling provisions, and as we were cooking he said that tomorrow we would need to go hunting. If we caught anything he would show me how to properly butcher an animal. We ate and settled in for the night, but as we were settling in he told me that if I ever got up in the night to use the outhouse to the side of the cabin, that I should always bring a candle, no matter how bright the moon was, and that if it goes out I should come back inside right away. With that he set a small dangling thing up on the door. Pick related. When I asked him about the thing on the door he told me it was there to confuse anything that was trying to get in. Later during that winter I found out it's supposed to be a rune for illusions or disguises. I guess the idea is that it would help make it harder to tell what was inside the cabin if something got inside the door. The next few days we went out hunting. For the first while we didn't catch anything. It wasn't helped by how we needed to head a fair ways away from the cabin before we saw signs of animal life, and Dana always insisted that we be back before night fell. On top of that he didn't bring a gun ever, just a bow and some arrows. I know bow hunting is a common enough practice, but given that bears roamed these woods I figured that it would be nice to have something with a little more stopping power. When I mentioned this to him he said that it would cause more trouble than it would prevent. Eventually we actually managed to find and snag a buck. It was a nice one too, enough meat that we would be alright for a while. We threw it on the sleigh and began dragging it back home. Yet more hours ticked away before we got back to the cabin, and something rather interesting was waiting there for us: ravens. Normally this wouldn't seem so strange, but when I hadn't seen signs of life save the trees in this area for almost a week, it seemed a little off. Dana stiffened up when he noticed it too. When I asked him about it he told me, "Drop the sled and come with me, we're going to need to butcher this fast." Not sure where this was going, but remembering our conversation from earlier and figured that it would be best to just go with it. We circled around the cabin, the ravens sitting on the roof watching us the whole way. Lying in a small snowdrift in front of the door was a rabbit's head, just the head, cleanly severed. The snow was still a bright red, so it had to have been pretty fresh. There was also a little indent through the snow leading up to it, made it look like it had been thrown over here. Well, it could be worse. We didn't really need the head anyway. When I asked what he was talking about he told me, "It's only right to return a gift with a gift. Take that inside and meet me near the butcher shed." A little ways off and past the wall a couple feet off of the tree line. That evening we butchered the deer, and when we were done my grandfather took the head, antlers, and all, and walked out into the woods a short ways before gently setting it down and coming back. We brought the rest of the meat over to the cabin, and Dana took the rabbit's head off the table where I had placed it. That night we had rabbit stew and potatoes. When I asked about why we were going to just eat something we found sitting there he told me it would be rude to just throw it out, and it wasn't wise to insult the neighbors. "There are other people out here? I thought you lived alone." "Alone? No, I just don't live by people." "Who are your neighbors?" "I thought I already told you, the Tom Tennisser live here." I didn't really have a good response to that. The next morning when we went out to check the fence, as was becoming routine, I walked out to see the spot he put the head down. There was nothing there, not even a bit of blood. The next few weeks went by in relative peace. We would collect firewood on every so often, we went ice fishing occasionally, and every morning we cleared snow away from the cabin. The temperature continued to drop as the winter solstice drew near, the already short days becoming a scant few hours of near perpetual twilight. You'd think it would get old seeing the same setting sun throughout most of the day, but you'd be wrong. It managed to be breathtaking each and every time. I probably would have stood there staring at it all day if I wasn't being ushered along by Dana. Things probably would have continued much the same way if I hadn't fucked up one night. It was somewhere around mid-December. You start losing track of the days out there, especially when they are mostly night, and we were going ice fishing again. We set out early, as the sun was just barely peeking over the distant mountain range, and hiked for about an hour until we reached a small frozen over lake. We set about like always, checking the ice's thickness and cutting a hold, etc. After only a few minutes into it we heard the snapping and cracking of branches behind us. We both stopped and stared for a few moments before my grandfather said it was fine, though I could tell he was bothered. Every so often he'd look back and scan around the trees. We weren't having much luck with the fish and were about to call it in for the day when I got a tug on my line. I pulled up a big trout and thought that this was great. We hadn't had fish in a while. When I turned to see if my grandfather had noticed, I saw him just sort of staring at it. A little confused, I gave it another look over and saw that it had a few huge gashes taken out of it, little indented lines cutting through the gray scales. Throw it back, this isn't ours to take. Okay then. I was a little nervous at this. Although not too much had happened during my time here, I had at least managed to pick up that when Dana got weird like this it was best to not argue. I threw the fish back into the pond and we started making tracks back to the cabin. Along the way I noticed that the trees near the lake, the ones we heard the noise coming from, had huge cuts taken out of them. Not like an axe or bear claws, more like numerous small chunks had been ripped out and thrown around. I asked what that was about and Dana just started walking faster and said we shouldn't come back here, it wouldn't be safe. One of my more frequent chores was to go out and make sure the Ordvag's posts were still secure in the ground. Of the many things that my grandfather was methodical about keeping just right, the word wall came second only to our food stores. This mainly involved going out and giving them a solid shove. If there was any shift I needed to hammer them in and pack the snow tighter around the bottom until I could no longer get it to move. Anyway, that night he insisted that we go over all of them again before going to sleep, and so we went out after finishing our dinner, mostly deer. You'd be surprised how long a single deer can last. He took one end of the yard and I the other. It was getting blistering cold out, where any bearskin started to sting. A cloud cover had swept over the land. There were no stars and no moon tonight, and the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving everything an inky black and gray. It was quiet again, like on our hike up here, where every little movement you made sounded like an earthquake. A little ways off I could hear my grandfather working, the shifting of his coat and the snow being pressed underfoot. I was about 3 posts down when I found one that was a little loose. I straightened it out and picked up the sledgehammer we used for driving them back into the ground. As I lifted it up and got ready to bring it down on the post, cringing because I knew that in the suffocating silence of the forest this would be very loud, but as I was about to swing it I heard something, like a quiet hissing mumble. Reflexively I swung around while I was bringing the hammer down and hit the post with a glancing blow, knocking it off center. Spinning around I tried to listen for it again, thinking maybe it was my imagination. The woods will often make you think you're hearing things that you aren't. After a few seconds of nothing and figuring that it was either just me imagining it or overhearing Dana saying something to himself, I turned to start fixing the post again, but just as I put my back to the trees I heard it again. It seemed so quiet that I couldn't make out what was being said, but I am sure that it was someone whispering, quickly and in a whistle-like tone. I really starting to freak out now. I slowly began walking towards the cabin, my back to it and the cliff face as I scanned the trees looking for where it was coming from. The noise didn't seem like it had a direction to it. It was like it was everywhere at once, still quiet and indeseemable but very much there. While in panic mode, combined with being tired and cold, I got it in my head that if I threw something into the woods it might scare off whoever was there. Reaching the woodpile we had outside, I picked up a small log and threw it into the tree lean and started shouting about how whoever was there needed to come out. My grandfather comes running over. My name, what the fuck are you doing? I told him I heard someone talking nearby, and before he can say anything the trees near where I threw the log start to shake and I could hear snapping branches. Get inside right now, he said, not taking his eyes off the trees, and so the two of us backpedaled into the cabin. By the time we closed the door, most of the trees had started shaking, the once oppressive stillness of the woods replaced with something akin to a hurricane. That night neither of us slept, we just sort of stared at the door, my grandfather holding his hunting knife. Throughout the night the sound didn't die down, it was so loud and violent I thought the trees must have been snapped in half. Periodically we heard things hitting the cabin wall, crunches and ripping noises from every direction. I told myself that it was just branches and the like hitting the wall, that it was just a bad storm. Around an hour before dawn things started to settle down, and soon enough my grandfather got up and went outside. I heard him start to swear and curse, so I hurried out after him and saw what had been done. The outside walls of the cabin had been covered, every inch from top to bottom, with words, violently slashed into the wood. Chunks had been ripped out of the comers and the door, the fence was in ruins, some of the barbed wire having been thrown into the treetops and many of the posts smashed into splinters. After a string of curses that I could barely even understand, he started to calm down. Never do anything like that again, ever. Come on, we need to get the fence fixed before nightfall. And like that he set off to start gathering up the broken fences. At this point I had gone from thinking my grandfather was a little unhinged and had started to take his native folklore to heart, right up to thinking he was the sanest man on earth. I helped him pick up the scattered remains of the fence. Ever so often we would find little bits of fabric or hair stuck in the barbs. I didn't want to ask why. We were making good time on having the barbed wire fixed, but I was still worried. Most of the posts that made up the word wall had been broken or were missing. When I asked about this, he said that they won't like it, but hopefully they just did this as a warning. Tomorrow we'll go hunting and bring them back something, a thank you for not killing us last night. Just as the sun started to set again, at this point in the year there was only about 6 hours of daylight, making it difficult to do much. We had managed to get the barbed wire back into a rough semicircle around the cabin. Given the damage that had been done the night before, I asked how much good the barbed wire actually was, and he told me that it didn't stop them but has slowed them down, since their beards and hats would get tangled in it and they had a hard time getting free. I couldn't tell if that was a joke or not, but at this point I was about ready to believe anything. Little did I know I hadn't seen anything yet. The problem was that when the occurrence happened it was almost December 21st, and that means that the cold was near unbearable, and there was so little daylight that by the time we got to the part of the wilds where animals roamed normally, it was nearly time to begin to head back. The first day we went out and searched for signs of animals we could bag. We didn't see so much as a squirrel. That night the wind was howling again. The creaking of the cabin would get to the point where I thought it would collapse on us, and all the while I would stare at the cracks between the log walls, where the candlelight didn't touch, and I could swear I saw things moving in the dark. When I finally did drift off to sleep, the last thing I heard was a quiet whispering, like I had heard before. The next few days were no better. Each time we would go deeper and deeper into the woods, usually in the direction of the distant mountains. We would be frozen stiff to where walking was a challenge for me. I have no idea how my grandfather managed it at his age, but he never slowed down. And we would come back empty-handed. Each night the woods would be louder, the shadows in the cabin seemed to draw closer to the candle than the night prior, and the whispering seemed to get more intense as well. So much so that I started to make out words, though none of them were in English, and if they were Swedish I couldn't understand what I was hearing. On the third night I asked if Dana could also hear it. He told me to try not to think about it. Each day was more overcast than the one that came before. The daylight was just a lighter shade of gray. It started to get to the point where our own food stores were getting low. Our need to find something became doubly desperate. It started to get worse by the fifth day. It started to snow. Not your simple puffy white snow that you see further south. No, this was big, heavy, and wet flakes that seemed more like little snowballs landing everywhere. It clung to everything, weighing us and the trees down alike. All the while, as we walked in a misty forest where we could hardly see more than a few meters, I kept swearing I could see things out there, little shapes sitting on rocks and tree branches that would be there one moment and seem to disappear as soon as I looked directly at it. I asked my grandfather and he told me not to acknowledge them, just keep moving. The longer the days went, the more of them I would see. It was on the 9th day of trying and failing at our hunts that we returned to a troubling sight. All along the tree line surrounding the cabin, a couple meters off the barbed wire fence, there were a number of large stones, big boulders that came up to my chest. Most were oddly shaped where the tops curved off in a direction. They were all pointing at the cabin. They had been placed every few feet all along the tree line, almost like a fence of the forest zone. When we saw that, Dana stopped and said, "Pack your things, we are leaving at dawn." I wasn't going to argue. Even as we got past the fence and closed the door, I felt like we were still being watched from somewhere out in the snow. It was too dark to see any of the little shapes that had been following us whenever we went outside, but I knew they were there. Hardly a moment when they weren't. We didn't sleep long. Sometime in the middle of the night, between the howling winds and the biting cold, there was a deafening crash and the door split down the middle, snow and frost flying in and blowing out the only candle before we even knew what had happened. There was a scurrying noise, and after a few seconds my grandfather had managed to light a little oil lantern he had hanging by the wall. The table and pantries had been overturned. Everything not nailed down was either broken or scattered around the room. I asked if we should leave right now. He told me that was what they wanted us to do, that we would wait until first light. It was the longest night of my life. We sat there shivering and staring at the broken door, the lantern's light just barely keeping the dark and who knows what else away. Several times I thought I saw something there, just outside the door, watching. When I saw the horizon getting brighter, it was like waking from a nightmare, only this one wasn't quite over. We grabbed whatever hadn't been broken and made for civilization. The snow had stopped, but the clouds still hung heavy above us. It would be 3 days until we got to the truck. We moved as fast as we could. The snow was so deep and clingy that we had to stop every kilometer or so just to wipe it off. It weighed us down more than our packs did. I don't know how far we traveled. I know we didn't stop, and I don't think we ate until it started getting dark. Dana said to get as much firewood as I could find. We were going to need a big fire. What about the marked trees? I said to him. I still wasn't sure if things could get worse. Fuck them, they're already pissed, it won't matter much now. That night we had a massive bonfire going. I'd bet you could see it from one of the mountain, it was so bright. Even so, we could hear them out there. The whispers never stopped. Every now and then a branch or rock would come flying out at us or the fire. It didn't make for a restful night. Around an hour before dawn the snow started again. The second day was worse yet. With the snow back, the little fucks got brave and started coming in close. Every now and then we'd get hit with something that fell from the tree branches, or a tree along our path would fall down and make it harder to progress. We didn't walk, we ran through those woods. I didn't think I could run so far, but I don't remember either of us stopping. We just managed to stumble into a little clearing as the light was fading again. We hurried and grabbed whatever wood we could find and tried to start the fire. The wood was wet and uncooperative, and the shadows started to close in. We could see the little moving figures at the edge of our vision again. I guess Dana was getting to his wit's end, because he grabbed the little oil lantern and broke it open, pouring the oil across the logs and lit it up with the lantern's sparker. The shadows retreated for a moment, and I think the little monsters were hissing at us. We were left mostly alone that night. Hell if I know why. Maybe even they need to rest some time. The snow hadn't quit yet, so by the time we woke we were both mostly covered. We set out before the sun rose. I think Dana didn't trust us to make the rest of the way in only a few hours of light. The trail was a fucking mess. Trees and rocks littered the animal trails, and the bush was so thick with evergreens that it was no better. It was slow going, and of course we were still being followed. We would still catch sight of them at the edge of our vision, watching and whispering in tune with the wind. I couldn't even tell which was which by this point. Sometimes I still can't. For whatever reason we were left mostly untouched on the rest of the way back. The poor trail conditions slowed us to the point that it was already dark and we still hadn't made it to the truck. Dana didn't want to stop though. He said we were close and didn't want to risk another night outside. I'm not sure when it was, but we eventually made our way out of the trees and onto a road. We followed it for a few minutes until we saw it, the glorious steed that would get us out of that place, covered under a few feet of snow though it was. We swept out the truck bed, threw our things in and drove away. I don't think either of us looked back. After we got back to town, stayed at an inn for the night. Best goddamn rest of my life. We woke early and drove for nearly the entire day until we made to the Eric Nelson Airport. When we got back, Dana stayed with my family for a little while, at my dad's behest. We didn't talk much about the trip. just said we needed to come home early. That spring Dana left and said that he was going back home. I asked him what in the fuck he was thinking going back there, and he told me he had lived in those woods for almost 20 years, it was his home and he would stay there as long as he had left. He promised to call or visit on occasion. That was 3 years ago, none of us have heard hide nor hair of him. My parents are convinced he passed away, they're probably right, but I can't help wanting to know. And that is where we come to today. I told my friends about what happened that winter and they don't really buy it. Can't blame them, but we've been talking on and off for a year now about going on a camping trip, and I jokingly mentioned that maybe we should go out to my grandfather's cabin. They thought it was a great idea. We're currently in the SKKY Motel in Whitehorse. We are leaving tomorrow morning. I'm still convinced that this is a bad idea, but I want to know what happened when my granddad came back out here. We planned for the trip to be a little less than a month, and we picked summer since I think it is safer than the dead of winter like last time. This is the last story I'm going to be posting for a while. Come the start of September, I'll start a thread and let you all know what happens. I'll take pictures where I can and have brought a number of spare batteries for my phone. Wish us luck. Hello Anons, Mr.OniMan here. I would just like to say thank you all so much for the love and support. It really means a lot knowing you guys love the Innawoods, X, and K related stories that I enjoy reading myself. I have a couple of things I would like to announce. 1. Be on the lookout for the Anon merch designed by yours truly coming very soon. 2. I will be turning on the memberships tab, allowing you guys to support me directly. I haven't figured out the levels yet, but rest assured Anons, it won't be expensive to get my exclusive content that's not censored and stories that I would like to post but would get me in trouble with YouTube. Any profits made from merch and memberships will go straight to the channel for better content. 3. Soon I will be making a Discord for our community to gather, shoot the breeze, joke around, troll and just be Anons, so if you would like to be a mod, you can reach me on my business email. We'll be making a Twitter for more convenient communication. Again, thank you all so much for the love and support, as it's you Anons that makes this possible.